bottom right-hand corner of this map. It's UTHERMAL. I forgot the map name. How did I do that? It's Lightshade. There we go. It's UTHERMAL. And the top left from Alpha X is Zoun. And UTHERMAL, the second time he is coming out here in the WTL during week number 3. They did play him in week 2, and UTHERMAL actually managed to get a 2-0 versus MaxPax. So, obviously the TVP for this gentleman looking fairly decent. And I'm excited to see, because I have not seen UTHERMAL play in quite a while. It's been, yeah, it's been a bit of time since I have watched a UTHERMAL game, but I am excited. I want to see what tricks, what plays this man has up his sleeves. As for Zoun, showed some absolutely amazing TVP last week against Maru. Absolutely amazing. Managed to play this incredible hyper late game TVP, almost managed to take it, and then managed to get a game off Maru in a very close match on Oxide. Ended up going 1-1, and then unfortunately did end up dropping the ace match to Bunny. But, I mean, Zoun wasn't looking the best. Was making a few mistakes in those games. They just looked like overall the level of play wasn't quite there. And of course, for my insider information, I do know that he wasn't feeling the best on that day, and still managed to get some amazing results, which is, you know, always so exciting when you see a player do that well. So we'll see how he does. We do have the Reaper coming out from UTHERMAL. Should be able to deny this probe getting really too much more scouting, and in fact deny its life. There we go. The poor probe will go down. Zoun will have his revenge eventually. But other than that, you have a natural base coming down for Zoun. And another thing I wanted to touch on is I don't actually know if these players have met before. I do not know if UTHERMAL and Zoun have played. This is something that I might have to look up on a Ligalac between games, because I really don't know if these two have played a best of 3, even the best of 3. I imagine during one of the NA, you know, ESL weeklies, they might have faced. But other than that, I do not think that I've seen Zoun and UTHERMAL ever play a proper series. So this is kind of, you know, new territory perhaps for both these players. UTHERMAL, of course, always very, very good at studying his players. I mean, look at that. Look at that trophy cabinet. A very, very successful player in his own right, and knows how to make builds work. So we'll see what his plan is here in this TVP. Of course, all that is needed is one win for UTHERMAL to get Team Liquid the victory in this week of the World Team League, which would be massive to send them to 2-1, which is of course what these teams are playing for. Two Reapers going to head on into the main. Shield battery's already there. UTHERMAL with this early aggression, not really going to get anything done. Splits up the Reapers to try and at least save one. Actually, it might not even be able to save that one, but yeah, both of them end up dying. So that's a bit unfortunate there for UTHERMAL. That's all the early pressure gone for the Terran. As Phoenix is going to be scouting around. Zoun has opted himself into the Stargate, which is, I think, a favored style for Zoun. He loves Stargate play, working with these early air units. And he just seems to be very, very good at it. So it's no surprise that he does. As early Widow Mines should be able to deny too much damage coming down from these Adepts. Excuse me, as the shade on in. Need to take more breaths, but here we go. Zoun, 3 Adepts, going to try and wreak as much havoc as possible. Eventually the Viking is landed. That should be picked up, I think, by the Phoenix. Finally is going to be, but 2 Adepts already go down. And they're going to have to get on out of there. Ooh, Widow Mine shot. Gets one of them very, very low. And one of them finally goes down. A few missteps there from Zoun. Loses 2 Adepts and a Phoenix. Both these players trading some early game losses, but all in all, not a lot happening. As finally the music's going to come back. I was wondering when that was going to happen. It was a bit of a lull in the soundtrack, but here we are, back to Terran music. It's very quiet. I can barely hear it. Siege Tank and Raven on the way for UTHERMAL. Immortal Phoenix for Zoun. Seems like these players just matching each other with tech. I say it's going to be a third base for the Protoss and the robotics facility, or the robotics bay. For Zoun. I would assume most likely going to be for Colossus. Again, you try and get up to 3 Colossus and then go into your disruptors. And of course with Phoenix, you do have the counter against Vikings, so you don't really have to worry about them, about, you know, a large clump of Vikings killing off your Colossus with an early push. So it is just a safe opening to go for. So here we go. Zoun does have 4 Phoenix, but isn't going to be able to find any opening. And now we do have Colossus production finally on the way. Stim and combat shields for UTHERMAL. And +1, actually. It's going to be a pretty strong follow-up here for UTHERMAL. A player who has always been good at timing attacks, and I would imagine might be heading into one here. This is a build, again, I've mentioned this many times before. Usually you'll go into this build off of a Widowmine drop, but UTHERMAL actually used those 3 Widowmines for early defense because he knew that Phoenixes were out, didn't want to go for the drop. So just left them at home and has now transitioned just a little bit faster into 2 medevacs at a time, 2 Widowmines, +1, and Stim and combat shields. And this is a push that, if you time it out and you want to go for it, can hit around the 645 mark. I don't think UTHERMAL's going to go for that. He went for the early Raven. So this is probably just going to be a more macro-focused build, and eventually the push will come out a little bit later than it normally would to try and get some damage done. Of course, the nice thing about going for the tank and the Raven is you have the disable for the Colossus. You have the tank especially, which will outrange them. And so when you do end up pushing, you have those few extra tools to help make this work, as double medevac drop heading out. You have to watch that Phoenix clump on the mini-map as Zoun moves in and just barely misses the medevacs. UTHERMAL's going to get away with being able to push this towards the main base, as the second Colossus is in production. Continued Phoenix production as well. Zoun not just stopping at the healthy count that he has, I believe already at 5, but is going to look to go up to 7. As his own +1 and charge is on the way. And I really like this from UTHERMAL. He's now going to push out with another push across the way. Has so much production. The third base is, I mean, quite delayed for him, but behind it, sorry about that, has gotten quite a lot, as it's going to be 4 Widowmines with this drop. Medevacs, Stim, combat shields, Marauders, a tank, a Raven. It's so much here for UTHERMAL, as he's dropping on into the main, is just going to hold position as Marines in the most awkward of spots. And might look for now a follow-up push on into the natural. What is that for Zoun to defend here? Well, it has the Colossus, has the Phoenix, the tank, though. Can start to shell away, but it is enough tech there that UTHERMAL can't really push. But in the main, he's still getting so much damage done. The Colossus is finally going to be pulled to try and deal with it, and it will be able to pick off a lot of Marines, but mining time denied is always worthwhile for the Terran. Killed a lot of the army units for Zoun. Ooh, great feedback. Make sure the Raven doesn't have any energy, and because of that, UTHERMAL not really going to be able to push the issue anymore, but has his third base going to be floating on to location, and you have to feel like a decent trade there for UTHERMAL, although it does leave a tank behind. And, well, that's a bit of an unfortunate loss, but you will stomach it as UTHERMAL. Widowmine. Ooh. Zoun's on top of this Phoenix control. I think only 2 Widowmine hits have actually gone off on them, which is impressive to say the least. So Widowmine drop gonna be headed out. It might just be scouted almost. The Zealot does in fact miss the medevac that is heading across the map, as UTHERMAL just gonna continue to try and apply pressure. Ghost now in production already with Vikings to help deal with the Colossus. You have +2 for Zoun. That's cancel on the 4th base immediately. Zoun says, my army's not in position. It's not far enough along that I can afford that I can tank any damage. Just cancel it and should restart that up pretty soon. Here we go. Widowmine drop. This has potential to get a lot of damage done. I don't know if there's an armory down just yet. I imagine that there is. Oh, doesn't matter because there is a cannon in position. all 3 of those Widow Mines immediately cleaned up. No damage gotten done. But on the bright side, another cancel onto that 4th base as that small group of Marines and Marauders pushes in once again. UTHERMAL just trying to find damage. Hasn't gotten a ton just yet. As ooh, that Widow Mine shot. Oh, gets so many of them low. That's one that you look at as the Terran. You're like, really? Really? You couldn't have done more. Zealot run by going to be denied, and continued Ghost production. This Sword Prism, Zoun, bit of a misstep. Had that in position. Didn't really have enough money, even if he put it into warp mode, to be able to really do anything with it. But still, would rather keep that alive for a counterattack perhaps later in the game. UTHERMAL throws out the scan, decides that he doesn't want to go for the push just yet. He's going to try and swing this around to the 3rd base, and that's going to, I think, a bit better. It's going to be a bit more open, unless he doesn't. And I'm trying to read a player who's still making up their mind as we speak. But UTHERMAL just patrolling around. +2 will be finished for Zoun, and it's double disruptor production. So for UTHERMAL, you have to feel like there needs to be something happening soon. I mean, the Protoss army is just going to get bigger and bigger. There's no real denying it. Zoun right now is on 4 bases to the 3 of his opponent. This army's just going to get scarier. You know, you have the Disruptors being added in. You still have the 3 Colossus. The Phoenix are still alive. And you're going to have Dark Templar added in pretty soon, as here we go. Zoun wanted to look for a pounce there, but great anti-armor missile as, oh, the dive on in with Marines. Can't really do it. It's 4 Colossus, actually. An additional one was added on by Zoun. There we go. It is going to be, a deny on that Zealot run by. But base will have to be lifted off. Won't be killed. UTHERMAL has to pull everything back to try and deal with it, though, and that just gives Zoun more space to work with. DT Blink on the way, +3 attack, +1 armor. Zoun just sitting in a great position right now. Blink on top of the barracks or on top of the bunker, and we'll get that down. Ooh, Disruption Nova. It's a pretty decent connection. You still, I mean, what is that? 6 disruptors out for Zoun. It makes it impossible as the Terran to try and push into this army. Same time, the Zealots will finally get cleaned up on the other end, but it's so many workers going down. Disruption Nova's going out. That's a good connection on 1. Oh, a cancel on the 2nd. And some great EMPs to get rid of all the shields on this army. UTHERMAL trying to collapse on in. Another Disruption Nova canceled. The 1st Colossus is going to go on down. The 2nd falls. More Disruptors dying. UTHERMAL collapses on the army, and there's not enough for Zoun to defend. The anti-armor missile does so much work. And UTHERMAL loses the base, loses 20 workers, but cleans up the army, and now Zoun has to try and remax. He has 2k minerals in the bank. He doesn't have enough gateways. It's only 8 gates. That's not enough to remax as quick as Zoun would like. It's all into Zealots. And more Disruptors in production. UTHERMAL can't push the issue, but still buys himself so much space and time to work with to try and get back into a better position. As that's +2 armor immediately started up for Zoun. And now has DT Blink. I would love to see DTs worked into this army. 8 being warped in. Immediately a scan goes down. UTHERMAL does know that there are DTs here, but even then, DT Blink is just so dangerous. You can get so much burst damage onto the army. Zoun's just lying in wait. Doesn't have any more gas to work with. He can only produce Zealots at this point as he goes back. DT's still waiting. Don't alert UTHERMAL to their presence, as this dance is a delicate one that UTHERMAL has to be very careful about. If he even takes 1 bad Disruption Nova, that can swing the entire fight, because Zoun has approached max out again. He has so many Disruptors. Again, can build so many Zealots. As, oh no, Zoun missteps! The dive on top of the Disruptors, but here comes more shots coming out. UTHERMAL has to pull on back, but it's so many Zealots. That's just the circumference that they get. The DT Blink on top. GG, Zoun collapses and kills the army. He found enough damage. And UTHERMAL has to tap on out. Zoun looking to bring this to an ace match. Just needs 1 more win. And as far as I can tell, I took the time. I looked it up in between the games. this is, I think, really the first time that these two have played in an official match. I imagine they might have played on maybe the NA ladder at some point. I imagine that, you know, in one of the NA EPTs, they probably have maybe found each other. But looking up on League-Lac, I think this might be the first time that they've really played against each other, which is exciting. And Zoun manages to get that win in game 1 with just some really, really solid macro. There's not much you can say about it. It looked like UTHERMAL for a second there might be able to take it, but the Remax from Zoun, the Disruptors, the DTs, the Zealots, everything was able to swarm over the Terran army. He's trying to force the ace match, and it looks like we're getting ever closer to that inevitability that it might happen. It would be exciting. It very much would be. If we do manage to get to a Game 7, it would be the second time that Alpha X is headed to one. As a 4-2 in week 1 for them. They lost 4-3 to Team NV. And now they need to try and force an H here, or a ace here, to win against Team Liquid. Again, all off the back of Hearthstone's 2-0 against Classic, which was just a very well-played series. Hearthstone right now, 6-0 in the WTL. 6-0. He's undefeated. Which is, you know, fitting of a player like Hearthstone, who has always kind of... He's always been that one player that everyone's like, yeah, he's good. He hasn't had, you know, amazing results recently, but he's good. He's good. And Oxide Winter Edition, it's a map that I think Zoun has looked great on. He managed to get a win against Maru on this map, which is always exciting to see. So we'll see if he plays the same style. Again, Zoun, his style has usually been the same. In TVP, he usually does just go Phoenix into Colossus, into Disruptors, and just out-trades his Terran opponent. Now we do see a proxy pylon here. And this isn't a pylon that you just put down to hide one. This is going to be used for something. We won't really know until we see more tech go down from Zoun, as it's also going to be a proxy starport from UTHERMAL. This is starting to get a bit exciting here, as it's going to be a second gate proxied across the map. A third gate actually proxied across the map for Zoun. He's going to look to be aggressive here. This could be very, very dangerous, because what UTHERMAL is going for is a Hellion drop. You build 4 Hellions, you send them to where that starport is, where the medevac is going to pop out. It has a bit closer of a travel distance, and then you send that into the main. And there's definitely a chance that Zoun can collapse onto. I mean, can just catch that out and get so much damage done. But here we go. It's only one gate right now for Zoun. The second and the third are finishing up. UTHERMAL poking at the front isn't going to have a lot of information just yet, but you already see the Hellions heading to that medevac. 3 Stalkers at a time being warped in. This could get really dicey for Zoun, actually. There's already a tank in production. Zoun is not immediately pulling the trigger on this. This is a build that needs to go across the map immediately for Zoun. This is a proxy 3-gate. You can't just sit back on it, because here we go. It's going to be Hellions on into the main. What is there to defend? It's only 2 Stalkers as that shot. 7 workers go down. UTHERMAL going to be juggling these Hellions just to try and be annoying. There's really not much that Zoun can do right now to deny it. Those 3 Stalkers finally going to head across the map, but the tank is already out. The tank is already going to be sieged, I imagine. Oh, the tank only now getting sieged on up. Workers have been pulled, but Zoun can't go up the ramp. Oh, Hellions trying to go back on in. 2 more probes go down. There's still 3 alive. They can one-shot these probes. The shots, not the best just yet. Only 3 Stalkers remain, but they managed to clear out all of the Marines. 4 probes in total added on top of the damage. Zoun is now down 10 workers. And the 3 gates have been shut down. Absolutely incredible play. I mean, from UTHERMAL, just knowing, hey, listen, all I gotta do is siege up the tank, defend the front, had the perfect build to respond to what Zoun was doing. And Zoun is gonna try and get into Colossus here, but I just do not see a world in which he has enough in order to comfortably get into Colossus. Enough economy, enough units. Just not going to happen. There's already just 2 tank shots. All those stalkers are weak. They have to back on up. UTHERMAL is in such a good position right now. I believe that was an additional barracks that did get canceled. Starport has finally found its way back home. It's, you know, it's only a 4-worker lead right now for UTHERMAL. Zoun has caught up quite a bit with the chrono boost. But even then, still, it's a 20 supply lead for UTHERMAL. He's just building army at this point. He's just going to look for a timing attack. There's no 4th base, or there's no 3rd base coming down for UTHERMal. It is continued marine production, it's stim, it is combat shields, +1, and marauders. This is, I think now UTHERMal is going to go for the timing attack. This is what he was looking for in the last game. Ended up going for the kind of the augmented version that we've seen become more popular, which is the double drop alongside a slightly later push with more. But if there's ever a time to go for the more aggressive timing, this is going to be it. And you see there's already 3 tanks on the map for UTHERMal. He is so ready for any pressure that comes across the map. And it's going to be a Colossus drop here for Zoun to try and get some damage back. And then immediately into Disruptors, which, I mean, is the right call as Zoun. You need something to get you back into this game. And it looks like UTHERMal's going to go for the exact same build. So it's 2 medevacs full of units going across the map. He's then going to wait for his +1 to finish up, and as soon as it's finished, he's pushing across the map with medevacs and his other group of units. As here we go, Colossus going to go on in. There's already a tank and a missile turret there. This is just brutal. Zoun not finding any damage. Again, his opening completely countered. You have to worry for our Alpha X Protoss here. I mean, he's getting Disruptors. They are a great unit to try and make comebacks. But if there's too much Terran, they just do not matter. They do not matter at all. And I love this positioning by Zoun. He's going to try and use this Colossus to bait the Terran army, but the tanks are in the front. He juggled back. Here we go, Zoun. Disruption Nova goes on out, and it gets so much damage done. I mean, this is the same move that Zoun has used against even players like Maros. Here we go, the drop on into the main. Slow Zealots are being warped in, but it's stim and combat shields on these Marines. I just do not know if there's enough here for Zoun to even defend the drop. I hope he has to bring the Colossus back. It's going to be able to do a little bit, but oh my god, so much damage goes down onto it. UTHERMal also pushing the front. He just has so much to work with because he's just so far ahead. The 3rd base is denied. It is canceled. There are tanks, there are Marines and Marauders. It doesn't matter if you get a good Disruptor shot. There's just so much to work with here for UTHERMal, who has the 3rd base finished, who has more units just pumping across the map. And Zoun tried to get a little bit cheeky to force the ace, but just completely shut down. And now UTHERMal, all he has to do is macro up, get more units, and then he can push across the map and end this game. Disruptor drop. He's just going to be able to scout out where UTHERMal's army is. There we go, shot going out, stim back. Doesn't get any damage. Tanks are going to siege up here to try and shut down the production of Zoun. It's a 50 supply lead here for the Terran. It is just such a dire situation. I mean, more Colossus are being produced, but you're going to lose the Cybernetics Core. No more Stalkers, only Zealots now for Zoun in the production tab. Quite sure what's in that warp prism, but I'd imagine it's just Zealots to be dropped on top of the tanks. Yep, there we go. Does manage to get one of the tanks as Widowmine shot weakens up the warp prism. Here we go, Zoun committing on in. All the Archon is trapped behind units. It doesn't really matter. He cleans up the tanks at least, but now you have UTHERMal. He's preparing for a flank. UTHERMal's setting up on 2 angles here. He has 2 armies, each in position. If Zoun even comes out of his base, he is dead. He is just dead. It's a 70 supply lead. UTHERMal's just, I mean, managed this position so well. And there's just not a lot you can do as Zoun. There's not a lot you can do. You're just so far behind. You lost so many workers early. Your entire, early pressure got denied. I just do not see a pathway out of this game right now for Zoun. UTHERMal's making sure you can't take a 3rd base. Disruptors are being produced because that's just about the only unit that can allow for a comeback in this game. But even then, UTHERMAL could tank a few disruptor hits and probably still be fine. The concussive shell on the way. Enhanced shockwaves for the ghosts. The observer gets denied. And again, I mean, the supply is evening out a little bit. It's only now a 70 supply difference, but UTHERMAL's approaching maxed out. UTHERMAL has so much to work with. UTHERMAL, he might just push the issue here. He has Vikings to focus down the Colossus. I mean, he also does just have so much to work with. Again, there's not really much shoutcasting you can do here, unfortunately. UTHERMAL's in such a good position. It's almost impossible for him to lose from here, even if he moved his entire army up this ramp, and it looks like he might just do that. As here we go, pushing on in. Viking is going to see what they can focus on down. Disruptor Nova does force him to push on back. That is about all that there is for Zoun, is that disruptor. It gets sniped. Colossus are trying to be microed back, but the one goes down. The army is going to die, and UTHERMAL will close it out for Team Liquid. They get the 4-2. They managed to take the win over Alpha X.